taking on the Aware Saga, and we have with us in the studio the new president of Aware, who will share with us her plans going ahead. Dana, you talked about focusing the organization in a way on getting your volunteers to do the work that they have to do. Now that you have so much more support publicly, how are you going to convert all this support into actual work for the organization?
I think it is about keeping in contact, keeping in touch with them, keeping the dialogues going. I expect that we will be a much livelier association from now on. Just judging from the past 3 weeks, the people who have come around to support us and to help. And judging from the voices yesterday, so many voices, such diversity, all that amount of inspired, passionate speeches from people we have never heard before, and people who have said they have never heard of us before until this issue broke out. And it was a very proud day for us, I think, and it was a very proud day to be a woman because there were so many good women voices out there.
Eugene, how surprised were you at the fervor of the support that came out, at the women coming up to speak and to organize themselves? How surprised were you by the whole?
No, I think I wasn't surprised. I think in the end, you had the makings, right, of something that would compel different audiences, right? The women, the men as well, right, and the homosexuals, and the religious communities as well. So it was something that would exercise, that would engage, right, that would excite many people, and I think it's something which shows the potential, right, of civil society, right. I think in the end, that important space between the family and the state, right, is something which all Singaporeans, should be very mindful of, and it's a way, right, of trying to put forth certain ideas, trying to put forth the sort of society that we want, right. In the end, right, it's not about the government, making their plans for us, but it's also about how we as a people, right, want to move on different issues.
Aubrey, what impact do you think this had on the public perception and image of women's organizations here?
I think what people have really come to account for is that space. That in this whole Aware Saga, the secular space is my space. That is what most people are saying. That religion and all that needs to stay in the private space. And one can shift between the two spaces, but what is secular needs to remain secular. And so on that then, where the women's organization is concerned, I'm very proud of the fact, if we look at the women's movement in our Singapore history, we were also the same people who brought into power, who were quite instrumental in bringing the current ruling party into power on the vote of the polygamy. It garnered a lot of women's support to come together on that issue. Similarly, in another point in our history, the women's movement, the women have come together to say very clearly the secular space must be protected space and must remain as the public space for all people in Singapore. So I'm very proud of that fact, that people rose to that occasion to see the issue as clearly as it is. That does not mean that the past exco, sometimes you forget, the past exco may not have been well-intentioned as individuals, but when the approach that they came in and all that whole thing that we all know now, it just raises so many doubts that I think people didn't want to take that chance anymore. They rather claim back that space. That is what has happened, and that is why it's a beautiful moment. Yeah.
Eugene, do you think on overall balance that aside, the fantastic achievement of that aside, that the image of women's groups has been harmed?
I think there'll be some segments in Singapore society who thought this was a cat fight that really went out of hand. But I think we need to give credit to the different parties that were involved. Right? I think all camps were very passionate about what they believed in. Right? And I think it's this sort of passion, this sort of advocacy activism, right? That we need to see more in our very young society. But I also agree with what Bremer said. I think it's important that in this whole process, right? We recalibrated, what we think is important, right? In terms of where religion and the secular space ought to be, right? I think the statement by the National Council of Churches in Singapore, was an important reminder, right, of how, while faith-based activism, advocacy has its place in our society, right? There is a platform, there is a place in which they can push forth those ideas, right? And I suppose, you know, as Bernard pointed out, right, it's not about, you know, trying to take hostile takeover and trying to moralize secular society.
I just want to go back on this point about it being seen as a catfight. I think that was the initial stages where people did not quite quickly understand what is going on, but it grew on its own, and people, I mean, and also of course it's a patriarchal terminology, to immediately see two women groups fight and terminate. And the other point is also the petty politics statement. I think people have also realized that this is not just a power struggle. This is not just, yes, there are some petty stuff that is flung both sides, but it has escalated over the weeks and over the days into like, hey, this is larger than all that we are seeing in so
Dana, final words to you. What are the lessons learned for you, besides the fact that you have to step up plate to lead the organization again?
Our work runs on passion. It runs on information. It runs on clear thinking. It requires us to educate ourselves, put away our prejudices, and to be able to weigh things, you know, weigh information that we get. And that's the same set of values and practices that we try to communicate to the people who work with us.
Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you, Eugene, and Brema as well for joining us this evening. We wish Aware all the best in its work to promote the rights of Singapore women. Tell us what you think. Email us at talkingpoint@channelnewsasia.com. Good night.